I just saw something, and I don't really know how to explain it. I'm a farmer in the Midwest of the US. I'm still currently driving a tractor as I'm typing this. I'm driving an Auger wagon, unloading a combine, and I looked out my right window facing east. Over in the distance, about 200 yards along the edge of a field that borders a wooded area, I saw this thing. It looked humanish. It was extremely tall. If I were to guess, it looked around 7 feet tall, walking on its legs like a person. But whatever this was, it was not human. Its arms hung down to its knees, but the weirdest part was its head. I don't know if this was its actual head or if it was wearing it, but it looked like an elk skull with large antlers. Elks are not native to where I am, but the antlers were way too big to be a white-tailed deer. I couldn't tell if it was wearing clothes or not. I have no clue what this thing was. I called the combine operator and he saw it too and has no clue either. Does anyone know what this thing is? First time I'm telling this in public, but I have an interesting one, since I got hypnotized by my stepdad. I was around my teenage years, and he told me he had been learning hypnotization for 2 years by a professional, so he kind of knew a lot about it. Since he was dedicated to learn for a couple of years. After knowing that, of course we had to try it once. And with we, I mean the rest of my siblings too. We were still young back then, and so all three of us were laying in bed, breathing in and out for a few seconds, then concentrate on his voice. I felt like I had to be real with this and just really focus on what he says. The idea was he would bring us back to our past lives, trying to remember it. And so, for 10 minutes, I was so concentrated on picturing the things he said in my mind to actually go further than my imagination would go. Everything went smoothly. Except for my siblings, it didn't really work on them. But me, I was still closing my eyes. I pictured walking through a long hall with a door at the end. When I reached the door, I came out at a beach. When I stood there, some Pegasus horse came at me and took me on his back, and we flew off to the sky. From there on is when it happened. At first, it was those small images, seeing a street. I think it was around the late 1800s. I'm not very good with history, I'm afraid. But I saw people wearing them black long hats and suits, and women wearing them dresses, what you mostly see in some movies. I know, yeah, it was in America. Note, that's why I always wanted to go to USA since I was very young. Always felt like I belonged there. After that, I woke up in a bed, still in my past life. It was weird, because I had a bad feeling when I woke up there. I was just laying there, when I suddenly felt something behind me. I turned around, and I saw a woman next to me. But she was freakishly scary, because she looked at me in a creepy way and then smiled, and opened her whole mouth. But her teeth were sharp. All were sharp and long. And me, I was crying on the other side. I literally cried to get me out of there. And my dad said as fast as he could to wake up in 3, 2, 1. And I woke up, tears falling down my cheeks. I never felt so scared before. That was one hell of an experience. Also, I'm a painter. One day I just thought of what happened after I woke up from the hypnotization. I slightly remembered that I ran off from that scary lady before I woke up. Years later, when I was in my early 20s, I painted, what you can say, an image of what happened after I ran off. I literally just painted it out of nowhere. A white man standing in an alley, scared as hell, and it was even snowing at the time. Since I was a kid, as far as I could remember, I've always had paranormal experiences. The first one I remember was in the fourth grade or so. I had started playing drums because I was inspired by a drummer in a band I really liked. I had fallen asleep but woke up, or thought so, to my drums being played. Thinking it was my little sister, I jumped up to tell her to get off my drums, but realised I couldn't move. I was experiencing sleep paralysis. I didn't want to open my eyes. I was scared. I felt a pressure on my chest that made it hard to breathe. Suddenly, a child's voice spoke, "I love you." I opened my eyes, only to be staring at a faceless figure. She had short brown hair to her shoulders, a red frilly dress, and no facial features, much like Slender Man. I closed my eyes and fell back asleep until I woke up. The next day at school, I noticed a friend of mine upset, not crying, just upset. I asked what had happened, and she said her cousin had passed away. I asked her to explain this person. She explained the girl from my paralysis, minus the facial features. The last experience I remember was 3 or so months ago. I had spent the night at my mama's in Georgia. My family had made me upset, and her house was surrounded by woods and one house. So I went into the woods to calm down. I was startled when a kid screamed, "Mommy, Mommy, wake up! There's someone in the woods! Mommy, Mommy, won't you wake up?" Changing a few words here and there. I turned to let the kid know I wasn't a threat, only taking out anger, but no kid was in sight. For some reason in my head, I imagined this kid with short blonde hair and a green shirt. Later that day, I was eating dinner and looking out from the window into the woods. A tall white figure, standing in a dressed-looking robe of some sort, stared back, or what I'd imagined being stared back if she had any eyes. I looked back to my food and ignored it, figuring I was paranoid from earlier. I looked back earlier and nothing was there. Only woods. This happened to me about 3 years ago. I found out I was pregnant with my second child. We were so happy and excited to add to our family. During my first pregnancy, I had the best, most intense dreams I've ever had. This pregnancy was different. My first dream that really stuck with me, right after finding out, was of my dad dying. I woke up in tears, but knew it was just a dream. 2 to 3 nights later, I had a dream about my mum dying. Again, I woke up in tears. I told my husband, and he said they're just dreams, nothing to worry about, even though he knows I believe dreams to be so much more. 2 days before my 35th birthday, I had a nightmare. I was at a restaurant carrying a baby in a carrier attached to my body. I was sitting at a long table with about 15 other people. Everyone was laughing and having a wonderful time. Then, out of nowhere, someone walks in and just starts shooting. As soon as I'm hit, I wake up. It was at that moment that my miscarriage began. I lost the baby 2 days later, on my birthday. That night, I lay in bed, thinking of what could have been, crying until I fell asleep. I had a dream. It was of my husband's nana, who had recently passed and I had been close with. She was sitting right at my feet. She gave them a squeeze and said, "Don't worry, hon, I got him." And then I woke up. I know the 3 dreams before the miscarriage were sort of preparing for me for the loss to come. But Nana visiting me, that was something that healed me. What do you all think? I'll start by saying this encounter was not mine, but my mum's. When she was 39, now 68, she lost her best friend to cancer. She was broken and so sad. I was 9. I remember her being so lost. We were playing in the living room when she excused herself to go to the bathroom. When she came back, she seemed happier, more at peace with the loss. I never thought anything of it, being 9 years old. Now, I'm a writer and artist and do quite a bit of research into the paranormal for my stories. One day, I was talking with my mum about how I need to research ghost encounters for a Halloween short I'm writing. She looks at me in a way she never has. She says to me she had one after her friend passed. The day she excused herself to go to the bathroom, she told me she didn't have to go. She just felt the urge to go into her bathroom. So she did. Waiting for her was her best friend and her bubby, grandma and Jewish. Her bubby smiled and grabbed her friend's hand. Her friend smiled, gave a little wave, and they left. My mum explained to me that it was in that moment that she knew death was not the end. You would be with the ones you love. They would hold your hand and let you know that everyone else is okay. She then went on to tell me she has had many different experiences since she became a mother. But I didn't know that they were until that day. Now, on a side note, I've always been interested in the strange, supernatural, and paranormal. It's like it was in my DNA. Now I wonder if it is. I was having a sleepover with cousins, and for some reason, we were sleeping in the living room. It's open to the rest of the first floor, and you can basically see the integrity of the floor from there. I'm dreaming, and I see a scary beast with claws and horns making its way up the staircase. I see it from where I'm sleeping, as if my eye were floating over my body. As soon as the demon/beast reached the top floor, my sister screamed to death. I mean, the loudest, scariest scream. I'm like, all right, what the fuck? What a strange coincidence. I keep it to myself, and it ends there. So I thought. Several years later, I overhear my sister and my mom talking about that story, and it sent chills down my spine. Turns out, they both had the dream of the same thing as I did. Well, my mom saw the exact same thing as me, but from the top of the stairs. She went to take a look, just to be sure everything was fine, because the dream was very surreal, and so was mine. At the exact time she got out of her room, she screams is to be heard. From my sister's point of view, a dark, shadowy figure slid under the door and made his way up the wall, to the ceiling, getting closer and closer to the top of her face. It transforms into a big black spider and it drops on her face. Obviously, that's what scared the shit out of her and made her scream, waking up with a major panic attack. The only explanation they found was the fact that my sister had borrowed a satanic book from the library, and this demon was attached to it. The book was in her room and it was returned the next day. It never happened to either of us since, but this one will stick with us for a long time. I was leaving my girlfriend's house last night a little after 3 a.m. and I saw something that has baffled me to the point that I feel like this is the only place I could potentially find an answer. My girlfriend lives right next to a church and cemetery. The church is at the top of the hill, and the cemetery starts at the bottom of the hill at the road. As I was approaching the cemetery to turn onto the main road, a streak of light, about 3 feet off the ground, came bounding from the top of the hill and crossed in front of me, headed towards the main road. The best way I can think to describe its movement is to picture a rock skipping across water, but instead of a rock, it was a streak of light. Actually, it's pretty comparable to Tracer from Overwatch when she uses her blink ability. My first thought was that it was some kind of reflection. I still think that's the only logical explanation. But then I thought it kind of looked like the reflection of a cat's eyes, but that would require it to be looking at me. And there's no way an animal could look at me while running in the direction it was moving. About the time it was directly in front of me, I tried to see if I could make out any kind of figure. This part honestly sounds extremely ridiculous, But it almost looks like there was an outline of a small, cloaked person right behind the light, almost like they were chasing it. With it being really dark, and me only barely making out that shape to begin with, I'm going to assume that was just in my head, but the lights was definitely real. I sped up while trying to also keep my eyes on it, in order to get a closer look. Even rolled my window down as I got closer, but when I got to where it crossed my path, it was gone. There's nowhere it could have gone, except in some really tall glass, but I tried to look there too, and saw nothing. All three of these things happened simultaneously. I was just daydreaming when out of nowhere, I started to feel abnormally tired. Then, the Alice in Wonderland syndrome kicked in, and I felt like everything around me, both in real life and my daydream, was really small. It became so overwhelming that I had to close my eyes, which was when the hallucination kicked in. As soon as I closed my eyes, I had a hallucination that felt like a vision than it did a hallucination. I saw a man with white hair and a white beard riding a horse. Normally, I would see an image, and that would be the end of it. But like I said, this felt like more of a vision. And for some reason, I instantly, I guess subconsciously, knew that the man on the horse was supposed to be me. I was then joined by a few other white-haired men on horses. But here is where it gets weird. As I was having this hallucination, I had another hallucination over top of it at the same time. But this one was weird. It only lasted for an instant. Like less than a second, maybe less than half a second. But I comprehended the entire thing in that short time. But since it happened so quick, I forgot some of the details. What I do remember is that it was me and some girl. No idea who she is, having the same hallucination at the same time, and unlocking some kind of memory that connected the two of us. But what makes this hallucination so bizarre, besides overlapping another hallucination at the same time, was that I know I've had that conversation with that girl before. Except, I obviously never have. It felt like deja vu, but deja vu, as far as I know, occurs at the same time as an event, causing it to feel like it's happened before. But I've never actually had that conversation. But I definitely remember having it, if that makes sense. I don't really believe in the paranormal, though I would like to believe it, so I guess that's why I'm really sharing this, hoping there's more to it than just my brain doing weird stuff, despite the fact that I'm pretty certain that it was just wild and normal experience. So if anyone has some compelling thoughts, I would love to hear them. Paranormal or just normal. My dad lives in the Scottish Highlands, has done for the last 20 plus years, and I drive the 14-hour round trip to visit as often as possible, maybe 2 or 3 times a year. I've always loved this journey, especially if I'm by myself, as there's around 2 to 3 hours of motorway, highway, followed by back roads through the mountains, through forests and around lochs where I can put music on and pretty much just switch off. For the most part, there's little to no phone signal, so I generally download a couple of playlists before I go, pop my phone in its holder, and blindly follow the sat-nav until it loses signal. I've been doing this journey for years, so really I have no requirement for the sat-nav, but I love to try and beat the ETA. It can also be quite handy when it has signal to let me know if there are any accidents or diversions ahead. Anyhow, on this particular journey, I was coming home. I'd set off at nightfall as there's less traffic on the overnight journeys and less chance to get stuck behind holidaymakers, especially caravans. I fucking hate caravans. I was travelling south in January and the weather was something else. My car showed an outside temperature of minus 12 degrees Celsius, 10 Fahrenheit, and the snow barely stopped. It hadn't stopped since I arrived at my dad's house 4 days earlier. My wipers were on full speed, but still the snow kept piling up on my windscreen, meaning I had to drive around half my usual speed. Every now and then, there'd be a short break in the snowfall, and everything just looked magical. It was like driving through a Christmas card. Looking down into the valleys, everything covered in a thick white blanket and lit up by the dim glow of the overhead moon, making it possible to still make out the river weaving its way through the cracks in the deepest crevices, reflecting what little white light there was. On these roads, there's nothing in terms of lighting, and what's worse, there can quite often be a large drop on either side of the road. Couple this with 3 to 4 feet of fresh snowfall and an inability to see any of the road, and you've got the potential of a lot of accidents. In order to combat this, there's 8-foot high sticks at the sides of the road with reflective tape at the top, red on one side and white on the other. Drive between these and you should be okay. So I was driving and driving. The snow just hadn't given up, and I was focusing on the red and white reflective tape to keep on the road. Up ahead, I saw the dim tail lights of another car. A welcome sight, as it was the first I'd seen in over an hour. Everyone else must have known that it was a bad idea to be out in this. Instead of focusing on the reflective sticks, I was now focusing on the tail lights of the car ahead. I couldn't quite work out what make or model was. A lightish, white or light grey SUV of some sort. Holiday makers. I thought this because I could make out their roof box and bike rack. They too must have ignored the warnings to not drive tonight. When I sped up to try and make some ground between us, it seemed to speed up too. If I slowed down, they slowed down too. The space between us remained a constant. I decided that my headlights must have been annoying them in the rearview mirror, so kept the distance as it was, blindly following their lights while being mindful to try and keep my tyres in the most shallow bits of snow on the road, avoiding the occasional snow mound. A bit of time lapsed. I have no idea how much, as I'd now switched off entirely, listening to my mix of 90s old school dance, the howl of the wind and splat of snow on my windscreen, and in between wiper washers, watching the red lights ahead of me, glowing in the dark like the eyes of a demonic beast, intent on keeping its distance. I noticed the car ahead start to take a turn off the road and felt a sudden sense of sadness and loneliness. I was losing my travel buddy, the only other sign of human life I had seen for the last few hours. I then realised that, having been so intent on following the car in front, I had no idea where I was, which wasn't an issue. I essentially just had to stay on the same road for 3 hours until I reached a fork in the road, turn right, and then onto the main road and see a little roundabout. Bizarrely though, my sat-nav now just displayed lost GPS signal and had me as a dot on a white background. Convenient, as everything was covered in snow. It never did this. It had usually downloaded enough of the route to at least keep the map on screen. It was then I got an overwhelming urge to follow the car ahead. I knew I shouldn't. I literally had no turnings I needed to make off the road, and I really didn't recognize the road that they were taking. And the more I think of it, I've never noticed a turn off that goes down the side of a mountain like this did. But maybe I just never looked. I decided to follow it. Of course I did. If I ever think that I shouldn't do something because it could end up in regret, I'll probably do it. Although, as I neared the turning, I started to doubt myself and thought I should stay on my road, but no matter how much I wanted to keep the wheels going straight, my hands and body wouldn't allow it. I turned off. I didn't recognize this new road. I didn't recognize my old road when I was on that either, so it really made no difference. Everything was white. Everything was dark. Lots of trees and the reflective sticks. If anything, it looked exactly the same, like I hadn't turned off at all. 10 to 15 minutes later, the car ahead started pulling away from me. Only slowly, but faster than I wanted to drive in these conditions, so I let it. It couldn't really get away anyway, as there was nowhere to go up this road, so I figured I'd see it again shortly. Another 10 minutes or so passed of driving alone, and then, in the distance, I spotted lights again, and this time I was catching up quickly. The lights were flashing in the dark distance. Amber, nothing. Amber, nothing. Great. My travel buddy has got their hazard lights on and they've stopped. I decided I'd have to pull over and see what was wrong. As I pulled up behind my buddy, a white Audi, possibly a Q3 or Q5, I'm not sure, I noticed the amount of snow on their car. Surely far too much for them to have just stopped, and there's no tyre tracks for me to pull into. But it was 100% the same car I'd been following. I came to a stop just as a woman in a big blue coat ran to my window waving her arms. I'm not the most empathetic of people, but it didn't take much to read the relief on her face and see that she'd been crying. She'd had to pull over because she had a puncture, and then explained she'd been waiting there, unable to call anyone as there's no signal, and thought she'd have to wait until morning before she could leave. She's had her ignition on while she listened to music and tried to keep the DVD player running for her little one. Pressing the heated seat button each time, it turned itself off, until it wouldn't come back on. Her battery had died. I thought she was being a bit dramatic. It was literally only a few minutes since she'd pulled away from me. She can't have been here long. Over 4.5 hours. That's how long she said they'd been there. Over 4.5 hours sat in her car with her 18-month child in -12 temperatures with no phone signal, food or drink, and no way to heat the inside of the car up. So this wasn't the car in front of me for the last 2 hours. But it looked exactly the same, even down to the dark grey roof box and bike rack. Coincidence? A big one, but that's all I can logically think. I suddenly felt angry. Angry that the car in front of me hadn't stopped to help. Maybe they thought I would. That's a bit presumptuous of them. I asked her if she'd tried to flag them down. A look of confusion or concern spread across her face, but she told me there hadn't been a single car go past while she'd been there. But I stopped myself from going any further, from explaining that I had been following a car that didn't exist for over 2 hours. She was scared enough from being sat there in the dark for the last few hours. I jumped out and looked in her car, assisted by the light from my headlights. I saw her little one was fast asleep. I asked her if she wanted some coffee from my flask. She said yes. I knelt down in the snow. She'd already tried removing the nuts and had left the wrench on the floor next to the wheel. It was covered in a layer of snow and freezing cold. I jacked up the car, removed the tyre, and replaced it with the pitiful space saver from the boot. I lit a smoke and pulled my car next to hers, connected the batteries, and instructed her to start up her car. Once it came back to life, we stood and spoke. Asked her where she was going. Stirling, she replied. Brilliant, I'll follow behind you. Again, I thought. That's on my route. She thanked me for helping her, for talking to her, and for calming her down. She thanked me for the coffee and gave me a quick hug. Quick enough to be meaningful, short enough to not be overly awkward from a stranger. She got in her car and set off. I got in my car. I sat for a moment staring at the all too familiar tail lights of the white greyish SUV with a roof box and bike rack. I lit up a smoke and set off. I sped up. I caught her up. I slowed down. She pulled away. Her speed remained a constant. I kept wondering how she hadn't seen the other car. The other car was exactly the same as her car. I kept wondering how I knew where we were, but yet we hadn't turned off or turned on to any other roads. As we neared the civilization of the A roads, I started to become more aware of the tracks left by my new travel buddy. The tracks in the snow left by their tyres. The tracks in the snow that I'm 99% certain weren't there when I was following her, or the other her. Before I stopped and offered her coffee. The snow eased as we entered a town called Kilmahog. We reached a junction, and she turned right, I turned right. We were now driving in sleet, wet snow that leaves a dirty grey and brown slush on the ground. Wet snow that makes seeing much harder than normal. Dry snow. As we approached the roundabout, she indicated left for the first turning. I indicated right for the last and pulled up alongside her. She looked, waved goodbye, and left. Someone, or rather something, took me away that night, diverted from my normal route. Made me feel as though I had no other option but to follow that car. Guided me into a stranded woman and her child in freezing conditions with no food, water, or heating. I'm still unsure how to explain it. I've not really thought about it too much. I don't like not being able to understand things or give them a logical explanation. It makes me feel uneasy. I certainly never thought too much about the paranormal. I've always presumed if the paranormal was real, it would present itself to me if it needed to. I'd live in a blissful ignorance, but now I don't want to. And me, that's worse than knowing. This was in 2014 or 15. My girlfriend and I were staying in a hotel called Stay on Main. I only learned later about the hotel's history. I only stayed there because it was cheap. That place was freaky as fuck. But anyway, I digress. My girlfriend and I were walking to a parking structure where our car was because we planned on going to Disneyland. As we were walking there, my girlfriend noticed a shortcut to the car down an alley. My instincts told me no. Let's just walk around since it's a nice day outside anyway. She insisted. Fuck it, let's go. Soon as we turned into the alley, I noticed right away that a man in a hoodie quickly turned and followed us down the alley as soon as we went. I told my girlfriend under my breath, don't freak out, but we're being followed. I told her to run and get help while I fight him off. As we started to pick up our pace to create distance from him, I noticed that this alley is a dead end. There's no way out but to go back from where we came. The man was closing distance on us, had his hands in his hoodie pocket by the telly. I make a fist with my keys as I turn around to face him ready to fight. We pass a dumpster. I swear to fucking God, guys, 2 men in perfect business suits with briefcases say good morning and pass us walking very fast. They popped us out of nowhere. They had black sunglasses, were white, and at least 6 feet tall. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't give them the greeting of the day back. I was in shock. This man that was following us had turned around and sprinted out of the alley. My girlfriend and I followed the 2 suits out of the alley back to the public streets. Hoodie guy was nowhere to be seen. But then we somehow lost the 2 men in suits. I swear to God, they saved my life and my girlfriend's, now wife. I'm convinced they were angels who protected us from a potential tragedy. I still give my wife shit till this day about taking that shortcut through the alley. This has been going on for months and it's freaking me out. Over the months, strange shit has happened while I'm trying to sleep. Every night, my bed will randomly shift and my foot will feel like it's being crushed, as if something decided to take a seat on my bed and just watch me. I've heard whispers and sniffing as if the entity has a pet dog. I always feel like I'm being watched. My room is in the basement and in the house. In the basement, the only thing that ever makes sound in the middle of the night are the pipes and the vents. There should be no reason for the washer changing setting, which can only be done by dials, or something smacking the water heater loud enough for me to hear a clear ting, or even a random shit falling over or off shelves. I've lived in this room for 2 years now, and this only started 9 months or so ago. But the worst part happened yesterday. I suffer from paranoia, so these past months I just chalked it up to me being paranoid. Until yesterday, at 10 a.m, I got out of bed, got dressed, and after I got up the stairs to get breakfast, I heard a clear adult female voice from a few feet away say, "Yeah, he's awake." It couldn't have been my mom because she was at her business, and she's the only woman in our house. Fuck that. No, I wasn't hallucinating. I never have before, and I was wide awake by the time I left my room, just like always. My family thinks I'm crazy and haven't heard or seen anything. Clearly, she likes me. Why else would she be excited about me being awake? So she's not really a threat, at the moment at least. But it's still fucking creepy. How do I get it to stop? It's freaking me out. I'm fine if she stays, so long as I get her to stop being so creepy. My friend told me I should talk to her, but fuck that shit. This is terrifying. What if I say something that makes her mad? I share a room with power tools and saws and shit. She's most active at night. That one time at 10 a.m. was the only time she's done anything when it was bright out. I've been sleeping in the game room since then. In hindsight, not the best option, since it's right next to the basement. But it's the only option I've got. This is one of those weird houses that when you enter, you can either go upstairs or downstairs. But the game room isn't fully underground, more like halfway, while the basement is fully underground. This is the room where me and my brothers play video games together. I thought I'd be safe, since this is also the room our pups, 3 huskies, 4 years old, sleep in. Today, I got up off the futon at 6:30 a.m., this time to turn on the lights. This is a much more normal time for me to get up, and I guess this is why she was excited that I was finally awake last time. The game room is L-shaped, with the futon, Xbox and Nintendo Switch in the short segments of the L. The light switch is next to the sliding glass door in the corner of the L, and the PC is down the long arm of the L, with my room at the end of the L, and the PC between my room and the stairs. As I reached the corner of the L, I see something in the corner of my eye. I turn, hoping whatever it is will be gone when I turn my full attention to it. Nope. I see a woman sitting in the chair of the PC. Long, brown, wavy hair, reaching just past her shoulders. Caucasian, blue eyes. She's wearing jeans with a plain sky blue t-shirt. She's at least 5'10", so she's taller than me. I'm 5'7". She looked like she starved to death. Or maybe her face looks skeletony because she's dead, and that's how her real body is now. I don't know. She then reaches and turns on the fucking monitor. And it isn't one of those touchscreen ones. It uses an actual button to turn on. Both the PC and the monitor do this. I ran back to the fucking futon and hid under my blanket since that's all I could do. I wasn't running towards her to get to the stairs. She didn't see me. At least I don't think she did. She was fixated on the monitor. I'm curious about who she is, why she's here, what she wants, etc. But I can't talk to her. It's terrifying. I don't want to. Hell, I don't think I even could, since I'd probably need a spirit box or something, which I don't have. No, I don't want to play video games with her either, like one of my friends suggested I do. How do I get rid of her? She's not a threat, but she's terrifying. Is there any way I can get rid of her without asking her to leave? Like, just throw a holy cross onto the ground and she'll be forced out of the house or something? I'm not religious, but explaining a purchase of a holy cross is easier to explain than the purchase of a spirit box or other known ghost stuff, since my family doesn't believe in this stuff. Should I try to get rid of her, or just man the fuck up and talk to her? And how would I go about doing either of those things? The previous homeowner left us a heavy slate billiard table in the basement. I had let the billiards scattered all over the table as I didn't clean up after a previous game days prior. Well, after arriving home from work last week, I was sitting on the couch with my cat, and all of a sudden, the cat's ears perked up. About 5 seconds later, I hear what sounds like someone hit the billiards together, with some decent force. I can't tell which ball was hit as they were all scattered to begin with, but boy, that was odd. I mention it is a heavy slate style because it is as flat as can be. We're hearing what sounds like constant thumps coming from the upstairs empty bedroom. Has a rhythm to it like a drum. My fiance works from home 5 days a week, and she's scared to be here by herself now. She claims to hear whistling, footsteps, coughing, you name it. I get that there may be residual energy from the previous homeowner, since they lived here for the past 20 plus years and died in the house. But activity has been picking up more and more as we renovate the place and change it.